We're live.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another of our lively discussion. My name is Kevin Nelson, and I'm joined tonight by Miss Carrie Ann Walker. And tonight we will discuss another interesting topic. Today's topic: oil exploration in Jamaica and the potentiality that oil will be found in Jamaica. Miss Walker, your take on this?
Yes. Well, welcome again, everyone, to our Liberty TV. Once again, we dive into a very interesting topic: oil exploration in Jamaica. I suppose we're going to be going down what is the benefit of oil in Jamaica. Are Jamaicans responsible for controlling the oil, or are we going to be dealing with outsiders, etc.? We're going to look through a number of items as we cover the oil situation in Jamaica.
Very interesting, very interesting. And Carrie Ann, we want to take it a little bit slow today because we want it's for decades. This has been something. This is the idea of oil potentiality in Jamaica. It's not something new. For decades, for a very long time, there has been many quests to search for oil in Jamaica, but recently it has become very much a buzz in the Jamaican community, nationally and even internationally. And persons have been asking us here on Liberty TV to talk about this issue for a very long time. And finally, we have arrived. We're here and we're here to discuss it tonight. So we want to be able to explore the issue. We want to be able to go as slow but as clear and precise as possible. So let's start by giving a little bit of background information on the situation. So the company that has been working with the Jamaican government to explore oil in Jamaica is called United Oil and Gas. So it's a British-owned company. It is a company that has performed projects in the UK. It's a UK company, obviously, in the UK, in Egypt as well, and now they're exploring in Jamaica. So they got a license from the Jamaican government. They started drilling in about 2020, in the year 2020, and recently they got a 2 year extension, and that extension will expire on January 31st, 2026. We've heard the company United Oil and Gas. They've had a lot of uh, press briefing, a lot of meetings just to discuss this. We've heard many figures being thrown out: 2.4 billion barrel potentiality, 23 billion US value over 25 years, and even 70 billion US dollar estimation of the value of petroleum reserves. At the moment, the company is currently seeking other investors to help them and spread the risk. And what do we mean by spreading the risk? What I mean by that is that any company who takes on such a task, there is a possibility that the idea of finding oil may work, may not work, or the expenses that they're putting into this quest can be a risk. They might not get back what they're putting in terms of a return. So there's a couple terms that we want the Jamaican people to understand in terms of what is going on right now. The company United Oil and Gas, they have made it clear that they're pretty confident that they will find potentiality of oil within inside Jamaica's offshore. They have thrown out terms such as prospective leads, each containing over 100 million barrels of oil potentiality. The idea of protect prospective leads is that that means that there's a possibility of what is called petroleum traps found within the shores. Seismic data, they've also made clear. And that is the idea that they will find evidence or qualitative substances that would prove that the idea of searching for oil would become fruitful and come to fruition. Your take on that, Ms. Walker?
Well, once again, we're looking at the exploitation of the Jamaican population through external influences. And I think it's time that our people start paying attention to the fact that they have their assignment. It can't be up to a few to pay attention to what's going on. Jamaicans, we're very highly intelligent people, and we need to start looking closer at the activities of our governments, because most often their decisions affect our daily lives. As you can see, the state of Jamaica is in dire consequence. I believe once I heard it's closest to the Haitian economic situation. So we're not improving. We're not getting any better. We need to pay attention to all the resources, how the resources are used for the betterment of the Jamaican population.
Awesome. And I see we're joined by Mr. Patterson, Mr. Joseph Patterson, president of the UIC. Mr. Patterson, we were just exploring the background of this recent Jamaican oil exploration. The Jamaican government has gone into agreement with the United Oil and Gas. Your take on that, Mr. Patterson?
Well, it's always a positive thing when you hear that there's a potential for economic gains for a country. And Jamaica is not short of hearing throughout the years that we have identified opportunities that will cause our economy to boom, that will create jobs for people, that will make life better off. So this is just one more of that. In fact, it's for decades now we have heard that there might be oil in Jamaica. But I want us to not just look at the upside of any opportunity, but also to look at the downside of those opportunities. And also to ask ourselves the question, do we have any historical evidence of how our government has dealt with previous assets that the country may have, and use that knowledge to forecast how they might deal with this asset should it be realized? So, for example, we have a clear history of what has happened with bauxite. And bauxite, as you know, is a very valuable resource, and Jamaica was blessed as one of the leading producers of bauxite historically. If you look at the historical data, though, what you'll discover is that while we have allowed foreign entities to come in and extract a lot of our mineral, extract a lot of wealth from our country, the Jamaican people are still waiting to benefit from that extraction. As a matter of fact, the Jamaican people may have actually lost more than they have gained from these bauxite extraction. In fact, if you look at it closely, you'll find that bauxite results in a pollution of our water table, a pollution of our air, a reduction in our agricultural lands, pushing farmers off of their lands, and it's actually resulted in a lot of pollution flowing into our rivers and streams, killing off our fishery and so on. And worse than all of that, people are dying without even knowing the cause of the death. The cancers that they have incurred as a result of the dust particles and chemicals that have been let out into the atmosphere. So the air has been polluted, the water has been polluted, and the soil has been polluted, and the health of the Jamaican people have been compromised. And for what? For the promise of great prosperity if we were to allow foreign companies to come in and extract our mineral wealth. And they have done so and left us with some seriously damaged soil and serious cost to our health. In closing, if you look at the data for bauxite, the cost to the Jamaican people far outweighs the benefit, even though a few people benefited greatly, and those are the politicians who are in charge. They get whatever tax revenues that they get into their coffers. And as you know, our tax revenues have always been wasted, mismanaged, or stolen through corruption. So the bottom line is, let us not just get excited about the possibility of finding oil. Let us look at what will really happen based on history and how can we better manage ourselves so the Jamaican people doesn't come out once again the loser in all of this.
I appreciate your introductory points, Mr. Patterson, and indeed, I'm excited to hear when we go more into details on this your more of your take and your views on this as we explore our thoughts tonight on this very, very important topic, because it is very relevant and very current. And it is something that the Jamaican people are very, very interested in. I noticed, Mr. Patterson, you mentioned about the idea of uh, transparency and education in terms of letting the Jamaican people in on things when things like this happen. When government makes such transactions with international companies or outside companies, uh, would you say, Mr. Patterson, there is a level of a lack of transparency? Are these some of the things that you were hinted at in your introductory statement, right? Just now.
Sure, well, absolutely. I mean, normally we find out about these things after they have been signed, right? So, for example, our highway system, they go behind closed doors, they make a deal on our behalf, and then we wake up with the result later on. Sometimes we don't even know the details of it. So, there is a lack of transparency. But even if they were to be very transparent with us and tell us exactly what they're doing, the highfalutin language and terminologies, and the fact that the vast majority of our Jamaican population are not particularly keen or even um, aware enough to appreciate, so they can be lied to and easily tricked by their politician. So yes, there is a lack of transparency, but also a lack of general awareness of the people and having the competences. If you're failing 75% of your students every year, it means that a large portion of your population can't even understand the problem, much more to understand the agreement, much more to see when they're being shafted in the process. So the whole system is designed to keep the people in the dark even before it gets to the stage of a negotiation, because their education level is not where it needs to be. And so even if they publicly tell us we're going to sign a deal with X company and they're going to give us 5% or 2% like they did in Guyana, or, and use all kinds of terminologies on the agreement, the average man in the street won't even know. All he's going to hear is that this is going to create jobs. And yes, it will. How many jobs? And this is going to bring new tax revenues. Yes, it will. But will those tax revenues actually result in the quality of your life being improved? Will you have better roads? Will you have better schools? Will you have better hospitals? Or will you simply have the government having more resources and the people still suffering, like in Guyana and other countries where they've tapped into all kind of resources, including oil?
Right, right, right. And I noticed right there you mentioned about tax benefits and so on. I'm gonna throw out some of the ideas or benefits that it is being said that that Jamaica and the Jamaican people through these government initiatives would receive. And I want you to tell me how accurate or how far off are these concepts. We talk about, as you mentioned, tax revenue in the billions, GDP increase, energy security, economic opportunities for Jamaica, obviously through a new industry. Uh, the idea of this potentiality of oil find giving the Jamaican government and the Jamaican people on a whole, the nation, to eradicate its foreign debt. Your take on that, Mr. Patterson?
Well,
How deep, how
Let me hear
accurate?
from Ms. Walker first, no? What are
Sure.
your thoughts? Yeah,
Well,
Ms. Walker.
as I can say, as Mr. Patterson mentioned earlier, what is the track record of the Jamaican government? Can they be trusted? What are the methods of transparency that will convince the people that whatever they are saying is actually what will become the eventuality? So these are the things that we have to look at. The Jamaican government has a history of lying to its citizens, not living up to their words, and so we cannot trust a government who has a reputation and a history of lying to the people. And it's time that the people, and I understand that going back to the educational system, one of the ways the Jamaican government continues to keep its citizen ignorant is by not giving them the proper education system. So therefore, their people are coming out not questioning the motives of their government. They're just accepting and going along. So the people themselves have to rise up and look at alternatives, because that's the only way they can get the best
Yeah, Mr. Nelson, sorry, could you just remind me of the question again?
Right. So you mentioned recently what you just said early on about the ups and downs, and so we want to paint both sides of the picture to the Jamaican people. If there are ups, we don't want to deny them. Well, at
Mhm.
least I would love to understand if we are going to deny them or not, and but also definitely the downside. And
Okay,
President Patterson,
so
the
upside,
upside, right?
upside. I
How
mean,
how 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 tangible, how real are the upsides?
all right. So if Jamaica were to find oil, it means we could become a oil-rich nation, like Dubai or Venezuela or any other country that has found oil. If you have this natural resource and you harvest it properly and use it effectively, then you're talking about a massive increase to our um, capital intake. So let's look at it. If you find oil, it means that you don't have to import oil. So you're
Right,
going to cut your import bill tremendously. Um, I know you have cheap oil, so to speak, for yourself to use.
right,
Secondarily, you might have a surplus, which means you can now become a supplier on the global market space, right?
right.
You now can have funds to build better roads, provide school buses,
Hmm.
have a good school feeding program for the children. You can now help with supplying more affordable housing for your citizens. You can build better hospitals or expand the number of hospitals. For example, Portmore, which is one of the largest area in Jamaica with in terms of population density, does not have its own hospital, for
Right,
example, right? So you could build a hospital, you could build more hospitals, more schools, you could pay your teachers better, pay your police officers better. So there's a lot of upside if you are able to manage the resource properly. Now let's step back and look at possible downside. Here's one of the key downside. What will it cost you to extract this substance from the ground? So here's what normally happens, and what happened in Guyana. A foreign company comes in and they sign an agreement with you that said, listen, we're going to explore for this oil, but when we do find the oil, here's what's going to happen. First, we have to recoup our investment. So you might find that the recouping factor is so large that, let's say you generate $50 billion in the first 5 years, for example. The company that you sign the agreement with, they're entitled to get, let's say, 49 billion out of that.
right.
so
Because there
there's
are agreements. Yeah.
so there's big money here, but you're only getting 1 billion out of the 50 billion because they're recovering. And then though you have a royalty agreement. And the royalty
Hmm.
agreement says, okay, we're going to give you, like they did in Guyana, 2% of whatever profits we made. But profits are determined by factoring in first take out cost recovery from the exploration and then take out operating costs. Now, what they can do to trick you, which they have done to Guyana and other countries,
Right.
they simply manipulate the figures by, for example, uh, turning the money back over into more exploration activities. So their base is expanding. They have their revenue take, but what is left for the country, the actual country, Jamaica in this case, is so minuscule that yes, while the politicians get a little bit more money to play with, it's only enough for them to steal through corruption and mismanagement. Because what's going to happen? They're going to have many boards and many political appointments and offices and commissions and whatever. And so you're going to pay all of these people. So in truth, real development will not happen in Jamaica. You'll still see the country looking pretty much the same. Our
Right.
schools will be much the same, our hospitals the same, our roads. But now you're going to have a big company off your coast with massive rigs and massive stuff going on. Yes, you're going to have some more jobs. You might have another 100,000 jobs or whatever. Those persons will get just enough money to survive like before. They'll just have a job now as opposed to having no job or having a different job. They'll get just enough. The tax revenues from that will be good for the government. but you're not going to see the kind of massive improvements that they're talking about, because between corruption and the poorly designed agreement and the small amount of royalties, you're going to end up right back where bauxite is. But here's the worst part of all of this. Should there be an oil spill, what will happen? So let's say there's a major oil spill, Miss Walker, big oil spill across, on our coast, and that spreads to our beaches and lock them down. So now the money you used to get from tourism, that's now gone, because nobody's going to come to some, oil infested beach and whatever, right? Your coral reefs and all that are now damaged. Your fisheries are damaged. The fishermen have lost their income. Your ecosystem is damaged and will not return for some 25, 30 years after cleanup and whatever. The government is saddled with a cleanup bill because the clause in the agreement didn't properly protect us. And even if it did, the money you get doesn't really, recover all the losses I'm talking about here. So the wonderful idea suddenly turned into a nightmare. And now you end up with a situation where what looked like heaven and the promised land turned into a nightmare from which we never recover in the next 50 years.
So you made some very important points, Mr. Patterson, because one of the ideas behind this kind of live, is that it is also an educational program, and what you're doing is you're educating the Jamaican populace on the issue at hand. So we don't want to appear that we are party killers.
Mhm.
We want
No.
to acknowledge that there are benefits, but we want to paint the real picture. Because if, let's say, for instance, we go ahead and we discover oil, and all of the qualitative data and the evidence and everything is clear and profound and right in front of our faces, and then the after effects start to come in. And we've seen this with several countries, especially developing countries, rich in oil, where the benefits should be there, but oftentimes, as you mentioned, through many forms, corruption, whatever, it doesn't trickle down to the general population. So, so you are right, Mr. Patterson, and it's very important that we make it clear to the Jamaican people. As I said, while there are benefits, there's also a drawback. And I want to go a little bit deeper. I'm not sure, what you guys think about, but I want to go a little bit deeper in the idea, painting that picture, something that the Jamaican population is all too familiar with governments over the years. The idea of, okay, so there's oil. We can, as you said, Mr. Patterson, we can build a couple schools. We can build more better infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the idea of such wealth falling into the hands of a corrupt government, mismanagement, and all the things we Jamaicans have been complaining about for years. How devastating can this be?
I want to tell you something. I'll let Miss Walker go next, but I want to point out something to you. You have hit the nail on the head in a very significant way. Here's what happened. All of what I just spoke about can be mitigated before. All of that can be mitigated. But the problem is you have a very, very corrupt system of governance in place right now. Without the checks and balances for us to even do well with what we have now. So for example, because of corruption, we have lost banana. Because of corruption, we have lost sugar. Because of corruption, we have lost coffee. Because of corruption, we have lost Air Jamaica. Because of corruption, we have lost our airline. Because of corruption, we have lost our bus service. Because of corruption, we have lost our ferry service. Because of corruption, our roads are now being owned by foreigners, and we have to pay a toll to drive on our own roads. We have to pay a toll to a foreign company, which means the money we're paying in toll isn't simply going to fix up our country. It's going out of our country. So our government have put a millstone around our neck and throw us off into the ocean, because the very road that we must drive on is owned by foreign entities. Our airports are owned by foreign entities, or at least leased by them. We no longer have an airline, so any traffic in and out of Jamaica, we're paying somebody else. The profit of that isn't coming here. Our tourism product, most of our hotels are owned by foreigners and they're importing things, which means most of our tourist dollars are not staying here. So just imagine now, we give this very same, the two colonial parties, the very corrupt colonial parties and corrupt system, we now give them, they now get to discover oil and have the benefits of oil. Now, here's what might happen. And this is very serious now. Any government which is in power, when they strike oil and that immediate wealth opportunities created, will not want to give up power. They will do everything in their power to hold on to power. And you know what Jamaica has already experienced when these two parties get ready to hold on to power at all costs. You're talking about murder. You're talking about massive upturn in violence to hold on to that power. But worse, the party in power will now have the resources to, for example, completely knock off the opposition, which means Jamaica may very well become an outright dictatorship. You following me here?
Yes.
Outright, so that the party in power may use these resources to lock down the opposition, lock down the third parties fully. Right now, if you notice, they're able to lock out the UIC. They lock us out of the media because the same guys who back them control the media. But the sitting government can decide that they're going to fully stamp out even the so-called, the fake opposition that they have and become a single party state, a one party state. And they hold on to state apparatus so that they can hold on to these monies. And our lives, you think things bad now. It go from bad to worse because you know to a dictatorship. Yes, America may or may not intervene. You know that America, if they're happy with the dictator, they will keep that dictator. So if the party in power forms an alliance with the monopoly corporation running this oil extraction process now, and the two of them lock together and decide that them want to run this country forever under this system, they can pour enough money into the system to ensure that they lock out everybody from ever being able to break the lock on government. And when it's not money alone that will run, they will use violence as well to keep the system going. And they will do that in so many different ways that the prime minister may go on TV and sound like he's more Mother Teresa or the Pope, while at the same time is involved in serious atrocities to keep himself and his government in power. Remember now, all of his party affiliates will also cooperate with him fully because they're now in the money. They can now suddenly get massive big homes. If they did this in the 1960s and the 1970s and the 1980s and the 1990s and brought us to our knees the way they did when they got to borrow trillions of dollars, then had to pay this back on our backs and cause us to suffer to pay this back. Just imagine what they will do when they find a long-term committed source of revenue from this avenue. And don't misunderstand. The companies that are coming here, they don't care about Jamaica. They don't care about the quality of life of the Jamaican people. They're not our friends. They're not necessarily our enemies either, but they're not our friends. And depending on the government that they have in place, they will do whatever it takes to keep control of this massive oil reserve if it turns out to be that. So let us be careful.
Yes. I think it's brilliant
Sorry.
that. Oh, go ahead, Karen.
No, I just wanted you to repeat the question that was
Right.
posed
No.
earlier.
Yeah, because basically, as I was saying, I think it's brilliant that Mr. Patterson uh, used the example of the bauxite industry and so forth. Because essentially speaking, what we're getting here is that even if there are sizable benefits coming from oil find, a bizarre government operation and high levels of corruption can eradicate most benefits. That's what we're saying, right?
Mhm.
So that's basically the point that I was trying to make and asking Mr. Patterson that the question about whether or not the idea is that a corrupt government can actually bring down the benefits that we can receive from oil, benefits from finding oil through this exploration. And it's very important, and that's why I appreciate the points that you're making, Mr. Patterson, because it's all glory, as you said. We'll find oil coming in Jamaica.
Yeah.
Everybody's going to become rich. We're going to become rich now. Them can't hold we now. Lots of clocks we can buy, and so on and so on and so on. And so
And
it's
by the way,
important for us to pay.
you know,
Yeah,
here's
go ahead.
here's here's something important for us to understand. Jamaica is already rich. We're already a
True.
rich country.
A good
It's
point.
not like we need to go
Absolutely.
and find wealth in hydrocarbons or oil or anything else. Jamaica is already a wealthy country. The only problem standing between us and the nation and the people enjoying that wealth is our government and the system of governance. Because they are the gatekeeper of our wealth. So they create regulations, they create roadblocks, they create hurdles, they create misery for the Jamaican people in order for them to control and concentrate the wealth in the hands of a few. So the PSOJ oligarchs, they understand what they're doing. That is why the PSOJ oligarchs make sure that they fund these two parties consistently, and they use those two parties to give us the illusion of choice while the three of them work together to systemically extract our wealth. And they leverage that with even their colonial counterparts, the colonial masters, as I call them, which includes the multinational companies. So right now, there are companies lining up to get into our oil exploration. They want to cut a deal, and the closer they come to finding deposits or reserves deposits, they're very excited to get involved. And when they get involved, you have a triangle of corruption. The PSOJ oligarchs, they are corrupt, and you know they're corrupt because they have consistently funded corruption. They have funded the two parties all the way, knowing that they're corrupt entities. And the two parties, we know they're corrupt, which is why our students don't have the kind of education they need to have in order to be as successful, which is why the regulations are designed to suppress small businesses and protect big business. It is the same reason why our police force is not a police service that works on our behalf, but works to keep the status quo in place. So Jamaica is already wealthy, but we, the people, cannot realize that wealth because our system of governance and those who control it and enforce it is keeping us down as a people.
And Gary, and before I let you in, I just wanted to reiterate what Mr. Patterson just said to the Jamaican people. Mr. Patterson is 100% right. Because here's the thing, this is almost the same case with almost every natural resource rich nation or oil rich nation. The countries are rich, but the people themselves are not. And that is because of what you just said, Mr. Patterson:
Mhm.
mismanagement, bad governance. And Jamaica has a sort of like a, it's like that's a crime here in Jamaica, it seems. It's like something that has become too normal for us, where our government is getting away consistently with corruption and bad governance. And if it is the case where we find oil in Jamaica, Jamaicans, this is going to be the same old same. You will not truly benefit from this unless our governance system is dealt with and fixed, and we replace the old system with something better. Carry on.
Yeah, so it goes back to the people around the world are all going through the same thing. Essentially, you have 1% of the individuals on the planet controlling all the resources. So the question is, how do these individuals get to control so much wealth while the 99% shares the remaining 1%? So there is definitely someone pulling the trigger. And our government are just lockstep following in line, and they forget about their citizens behind. So it goes back to the people holding their government accountable. They have to now do the work. They've been relying on other people to step up and take leads and do whatnot, and they sit back and they complain. But they have to now start scrutinizing their government and be very involved in what their governments are doing to ensure that not only for themselves they inherit what is essentially theirs, but their children and their children's children have a future. Because right now the world is in dire. As you look, you see that people are getting poorer. We're moving back into slavery. And so, again,
Oh,
responsibility in
what
citizenships.
you just mentioned, Miss Walker, that the people need to take more care to pay attention to what the government is doing and to hold them accountable. But bear with me for a second and let's look at what has happened. In 1962, Mr. Nelson, when we became independent, the vast majority of Jamaicans were illiterate. You know that, right?
Right.
Yeah, the vast majority were illiterate, um, undereducated, uneducated. You only had a small group. The small group of people that were more literate and more educated. A subset of them formed the political elite, and they led us. They led the ignorant people. So even when they created the Constitution, they didn't even bother to consult with the people because they're like, you don't have a clue what you're talking about. We know what's best for you. So they drafted a constitution and they went off they drafted some premises and they went off to England and then England gave them the final touches and say, yeah, this is where it should go. And they came back to Jamaica. From then until now, and even prior, they have been framing our thoughts and framing our mind and directing us in a particular way. Today, the people of Jamaica today, if you think about them carefully, the people of Jamaica today are now hungry, struggling, suffering, lost, exhausted, or completely brainwashed, right? So you have a few of us who are ridiculous enough. We're running around championing green or orange. We're so out of it. Those are the ones who are insane. Actually, they have lost their sanity. They can't. They have lost all perspective on what's going on. The vast majority, though, have checked out. They have checked out and they're just surviving. So they're trying to find a way to make ends meet. So every morning they get up. How do I get some food on the table? How do I send the kids to school? How do I put gas in the car? How do I pay this insurance, this car insurance bill? How do I pay the fitness on my vehicle if they have one? They don't have the headspace and the time and energy to A, pay attention, B, learn, and then C, take action. So in all societies, always a small number of people who lead the charge and the mass follows one way or the other. The system we have in Jamaica right now, politically, and by virtue of the media and by virtue of the economy, concentrate that communication ability and that organizing ability in the hands of the worst set of people in our country, right? So the two major parties continues to be the leaders of the people. So the people pay scant regard to them, and when push comes to shove, follow wherever they lead. So if they say, okay, tomorrow we're going to give China the rights to do this, the people just follow along. They might cuss and complain a little bit, in a very uninformed way. They won't know all the details. They won't be able to query all the details. But at the end of the day, they'll go along. Just like how when the politicians recently massively increased their salaries,
Mm.
a few people went out with placards and say, no, you shouldn't do this. And there's a general uproar. People kind of, quarrel a little bit. But at the end of the day, it goes through for the most part. And we just live with it. So if we're going to have a change, what's going to have to happen is that the UIC is going to have to convince enough of us, regardless of the various limitations. We're not carried on the news regularly, and if they do carry us, they try to find something negative. So we're not going to get it from traditional media. We won't get the money from the PSOJ oligarchs because their money is betting on their two horses. So those two horses will get the money. They will also get the media attention. We know the UIC has to find a way to galvanize the people, as difficult as it is with those impediments, and get them to say, wait a minute, the only way we can change things in Jamaica, the only way we can cause a difference to happen is if we lead a demonstration, a riot, but not a normal demonstration and not a normal riot. Not a demonstration where a few of us go out and raise placards and say, yeah, yeah, yeah. Or a riot where we're going block roads and burn car and burn tire and so on. No, we become a little bit more intelligent and organized. And we say, listen, let's beat them at their own game. Why don't we organize our own political party, in this case, the UIC? Why don't we all volunteer in that party? All of us sign up and say, we join this. So when you look at the register, it's getting fatter and fatter and fatter every day. So you have 100 people, 1,000 people, 100,000 people, 500,000 people, and they're all signed on there. And then they're all donating, let's say, $250 every week. So that the little group, just like how Marcus Garvey did it, that's what Marcus Garvey did when he formed the UNIA. And so now this little group now, or whatever big group, you're building your numbers, you're building your financial resources, and you're volunteering to spread the message, and one coca full up the basket. So you have a whole heap of people. Now, when it comes to election, you have 500,000 Jamaicans with the financial resources to campaign hard, because we, the people, own the party, we, the people, fund the party. And as a result of that, we now can take the government through their own electoral process, discard the constitution, replace it with a better one, with a better system of governance, with proper checks and balances. And so now, whether it is oil or agriculture or tourism or transportation, we now have good governance to ensure we, the people, benefit from that. What are your thoughts?
I want to ride. I want to pick up what you said, and I want to bring. There's a comment here from Louis Barton. It says we need a detailed definition of corruption. Is it only when government officials take bribes, or is there more details to corruption? I think it's a good question and ties into what we're talking about right now, because we want to put the spotlight on corruption because it's very important. Corruption, mismanagement, whatever. You want to take on that question?
Ms. Walker, you want to go first?
Well, I wouldn't know how to answer this particular question, but my guess would be that um, corruption would involve the theft, the lies, and the distortion of truth. And government are known to. I think we have to redefine what we consider government. In fact, because when I look at government around the world and their behavior, there seems to be more against the people rather than working for the people. And so we have to take a second look at our definition. What is the definition of government? How do we perceive government? Are they working for the people? Because it seems that there's a huge barrier, a huge breakdown in that relationship. So that's my take on the whole definition of government, to redefine what we consider government, because it's not working for the people anymore.
Mr.
Well,
Barton, corruption is beyond taking bribes. To me, corruption, poor leadership, bad leadership, is also for me a form of corruption as well. Not being transparent and open to the Jamaican people, as Mr. Patterson was alluding to early on, is also a form of corruption. Having deals with overseas companies and signing agreements and telling the Jamaican people after is a form of corruption.
yeah, so
Not,
corruption,
yes,
I
go ahead.
mean,
Deception too.
corruption to me, first and foremost, is when one abuses their position to enrich themselves or others, um, by virtue of their position. So you use your position in a way that it should not be used to enrich yourself or to enrich others that you're in collusion with. So there are, of course, corruptions in different places. You have corruption in government. You have political corruption, which is corruption in how you run elections. You have corruptions in business, industry. You have corruption even in the classroom in education. But we're here concerned about the corruption found in governance. Now, when we talk about good governance versus bad governance, what are we talking about? In good governance, you're talking about a government which ensures that the resources that it has control over is used in the way that it should be used to better the lives of the citizens. So if the resources of the nation, be it tax resources or otherwise, are not being used for the purpose for which they should be used, that is corruption. So let's apply this to, let's say, the oil revenues. Let's say we have an oil company. If our government does not enter into a deal that is in the best interest of the Jamaican people and avoid any deals that is going to give individual politicians or their party a financial advantage, then you don't have corruption. You have good governance. If, on the other hand, um, the government of the day strikes a deal that is more designed to better the interest of their political party rather than the interest of the Jamaican people, then you're going to have a problem. And that's normally what happens. Now, when you have proper checks and balances, that doesn't happen. So let's say, for example, we have the UIC system in place. In the UIC system, all politicians are elected under a 100% publicly funded system, meaning there's no politician that is now beholden to the PSOJ oligarchs or to bad money from Batman or their own private money that they have spent and want to make it back, because you have now eliminated that as an influencer over a political system. A 100% publicly funded campaign financing system. That's one. Two, if you now separate the three elements of government so that they're not beholden to each other. So, for example, your senators are elected by parish to represent the people of their parishes, as opposed to what they are now, senators who are appointed by the prime minister and appointed by the leader of the opposition, which makes them beholden to their political parties and to those who control their political parties, and they're now partisan in their views, as opposed to being elected senators from the 14 parishes to oversee the interest of their parishes. That will bring checks and balance. The same thing is true if you separate the executive. Right now, the executive power of Jamaica is mixed up with the legislative power, meaning the prime minister comes from the House of Representatives, and senators are also a part of the cabinet. So you don't have proper oversight because they're now conflicted. You have an MP who is also a minister of government. That's a conflict of interest. And therefore, the House of Representatives, which forms the majority of in the current system, the party that wins the most seats forms the majority. Now, they also then form the executive branch. So what happened here? The party in power, or the party with the larger amount of MPs in the House of Representatives, have a vested interest to help to cover up for the executive branch, because they're a part of the executive branch and they're a partisan element. Similarly, the senators, because they are beholden to the prime minister and the opposition leader, they cannot speak freely. And at the end of the day, on top of all of this, the PSOJ funds them both. So both of them are beholden to the PSOJ oligarchs and will not make any decision that conflicts with the interest of the PSOJ oligarchs. Now, guess who's going to control the PSOJ oligarchs? The same oil company. When them come to Jamaica, they're going to have a big seat on the PSOJ oligarchs, because you don't get your seat by election, you get a seat by money. Okay? They will control the Chamber of Commerce because there's money around things there, so too. They will also be able to pay off different politicians because all of them greedy, and there's no effective way of checking the movement in their wealth as a result of illicit means. As you can see, we go forever in trying to figure out the illicit 6 until it becomes illicit 8. So what is going to happen is the big powerful cartels that come into our country will be able to pay off everybody. So what you're going to see is the various parliamentarians having bigger house like the prime minister on different pieces of the hills in Jamaica. They're going to be able to buy up more lands, like some of our ministers who, you have ministers in Jamaica here who, when they leave office, they have hundreds of acres of lands in this country. when most Jamaicans don't have any land. So the whole system is rigged for us to fail. So the only way the Jamaican people can get out of this is if they decide to agree to organize their own political party for the first time in the history of Jamaica since Marcus Garvey and create the UIC as the People's Party, which is not beholden to the PSOJ oligarchs, which is funded entirely by the people of Jamaica through their donations. And the people of Jamaica now say, listen, this party are Fiwi. So when we elect it, it will work for us because nobody else controls it.
Yeah, the points you're making, Mr. Patterson, makes it fundamentally clear to the Jamaican people that the idea and the issue of corruption is very profound in any discussion, in any talks about the potentiality of finding oil in Jamaica. Ms. Walker.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch base on what Mr. Patterson said earlier about the checks and balance system. The fact of the matter is that we have a person in Jamaica claiming to be the governor general that is supposed to represent the monarch. And according to what is documented, this individual is supposed to keep the government of Jamaica in check. When the government is moving away from the citizens in their policies and procedures, the governor general is supposed to step in. Therefore, this is another sort of evidence to demonstrate that we have the British monarch behaving badly, claiming to be something, representing something that they are not, because they really sit at the head of the table of the Jamaican government. And they are supposed to oversee all that goes on. So it goes right back to England and the European colony who is still colonizing Jamaica.
So to tie these points into another sets of scenario, we want to pinpoint two countries. One of them, long-standing in the idea of oil, Nigeria. The other recently, one of our neighboring countries, Guyana, in 2015, discovered oil on its shore. Now we talk about corruption. It is said many times that one of Guyana's struggles with the idea that they are an oil rich nation, but none of that wealth have spilled down towards the general population or the majority of people in Nigeria is because of corruption. They mentioned that there are three major tribes, as they would call them, that are fighting for power with this, and that has hampered any form of success of the wealth trickling down to the regular day to day Nigerians. Now, come closer to home. Guyana, as I mentioned, 2015, oil discovery. So far, they're doing well. The Prime Minister has made it clear that he wants to avoid what is known as the curse of oil. And what is that? Exactly what has been happening to nations like Nigeria, that is rich in oil and so on, but yet true wealth has never come down to the people. And we fear that the same situation will happen in Jamaica because over the years we've dealt with corrupt governments consistently. So far, Guyana, 1.6 billion so far in the idea of discovering oil. They built schools, they built hospitals, they've done a lot, but they've done that before. In Jamaica, we have built schools, we've built hospitals, of course, not taking away from the benefits that we can do more, as you mentioned in the at the beginning, Mr. Patterson. We can do more. However, we have zero confidence if we are to use the track records of our Jamaican governments that we can separate the idea of corruption from this. And so the Guyanese Prime Minister, as I mentioned, wants to avoid that curse. Your take so far, guys, on what has been happening in Guyana? How do we
Well,
size up what is happening in Guyana in comparison to what may happen in Jamaica?
well, I mean, Guyana is going through a very rough spot at the moment because
Right.
the the government that negotiated the deal in Guyana, they negotiated a deal that is heavily in favor of the extracting company.
Mm-hmm.
And normally in all of these former colonial territories, It's the same thing, right? It's an extraction economy and an extraction process. So the goal is how much can we extract from these people at the lowest possible cost, which is business, I guess, from their perspective. But the government, in the first instance, negotiated a very loose contract that gave the extracting company a tremendous advantage over the people. The subsequent government that campaigned on the idea that it was going to fix the problem, you know, later on just simply said, well, we can't change an agreement that was signed before with somebody else, which is kind of true. You can't just, otherwise you have a problem. If two sides sign an agreement willingly, then you have to honor that agreement unless you can renegotiate. But the problem is these countries normally are lacking in competence, right? Like Jamaica. We have politicians negotiating on our behalf who are not necessarily the most competent persons on the planet because we don't have a system in Jamaica where we, like the UIC is proposing, where you ensure that a person, before they can run for office, they actually have the competences to serve. For example, how many of our politicians understand anything about entering into oil agreements? We have no experience in that as a country generally. Will they be wise enough and smart enough to know to call upon external consultants that are independent of the people they're dealing with? And are they able to leverage those consultancy? Are they able to look at historical data with other countries and extrapolate and I don't have the confidence, based on what I've seen our government done so far, I don't have the confidence that they have the competences necessary to make decisions on our behalf in high level contracts like these multi-billion-dollar contracts with years and years of consequences attached to them. And that has already been made clear in all the previous contracts that they've signed. Whether it's to sign over our sugar industry to the Chinese, whether it's to sign over our highways to the Chinese and others, whether it's to sign over or even look at Air Jamaica. I mean, when they ran Air Jamaica, it just kept mounting up in losses and losses and losses and losses. And like, so they can't really manage anything. So before you can be a good negotiator, you need to have been a good manager. So you understand business, you understand how to negotiate, and then you're bringing those competencies now to the table. Now, if you're an effective leader, you know how to draw upon different competencies of other people from around the world to inform your decision before you make it. But I can tell you this, the primary thing that drives the decision of any politician in Jamaica is when we can get out of this now. That is the primary thing, because they're very short-term oriented in their thinking, and rightly so, because the incentives built into the current governance model is a short-term incentive, right? You're not, our system of governance is not designed to incentivize our politician to think 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. They're incentivized to think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, if that long years, right? How do I win the next election? What do I do? I'll give you an example. The compensation package for our politicians, is it designed to incentivize them to ensure that Jamaica achieves certain GDP levels in a particular time frame? Is it designed to index their pension fund to the quality of life of Jamaicans in the next 10, 15 years? When I leave office, if I were to be in one of those two colonial parties, and I were to be a minister, an MP, or the prime minister, when I leave office, is there any consequences to me for the quality of the country that I've left behind? None whatsoever. Right now, PJ Patterson, the former prime minister, before he left office, he made sure to change the law because he was thinking, and he was thinking about himself. He changed the law so that a former prime minister, as his pension, will always get the salary of a sitting prime minister. That's how he changed the law to suit himself. Now, all of us are self-motivated to some degree. So why don't you design your system to make congruent the self-interest of our politician with the interest of the people of Jamaica? Now, that's what I would do. I would design the system so that our existing politicians know that if they make good decisions, even if they were to be voted out of office or leave office, their pension plan, that is tied to their performance while they were in office and is also tied to the future performance of Jamaica. And then now they're incentivized to think the way the UIC is trying to get them to think. Okay? But that kind of thinking fly past our leaders because we don't have leaders. We have misleaders. Their goal is simply how do we trick them to get elected again? How do we extract as much as possible now so if we lose the next election, we're financially well off as individuals? How do we structure deals with external parties so we get an immediate cash benefit today, regardless of the long-term consequences on our people? I'll give you one more example. Sorry for talking so much. But when our agricultural ministers saw it fit to give Jamaican farmers free GMO seeds to replace our organic seeds and to dissuade us from building our own organic fertilizers, to substituting that with imported fertilizer and give us free fertilizer, of course, free. But it wasn't free. That was just the cost of doing business for the smart people outside of Jamaica. They know that if you it's like drugs, eh? If you win over your potential market by giving out free samples of drugs, and then they become hooked on it, then you have them for life. So the small cost of the what you issued now will be paid for in multiples, hundreds of multiples down the road. The same thing has happened with our agri sector. They have destroyed it, destroyed our organic capacity, or minimized it and reduced it, destroyed our farmers by tricking them into the freeness, which then caused them to be replaced by cheaper imports. And that's what we're going to do in every area. So for the oil, wonderful. But the Jamaican people under this system will never see serious, significant benefit. You'll see some. They will give out 200 more homes when we need 200,000 more homes, right? So the prime minister will give out some more homes, they'll cut some more ribbons, and we'll say, hey, look, the prime minister did something. They will build another highway, and we'll clap again, and it will be a highway that is owned by another company, and we're paying tolls on it. All right? They will bring in some more police cars and have a fanfare about it, but crime will still be high because the underlying problem of proper investigation, proper monitoring, and so on would not have been done. So they'll do little tokens of things, which is appealing to too many Jamaicans. It's like in the election process. Many Jamaicans are happy during election time to get a T-shirt, a cap, $5,000 or $10,000, be feted for an afternoon or an evening to some food and drink, and then they will suffer the next 5 years until that come back again. They have trained our people into that, and the UIC is saying the time has come for us to move away from that, and I'm hoping we will.
Right, right, right.
Well, I,
Go
I, I
ahead.
just want to add. I just want to add as well that this is not Jamaica is not an isolated incident. Some of the same behavior that's going on in Jamaica is also happening in Canada. In fact, the economy of Canada is on the verge of being ruined by the current leader. And what do the current leader of Canada has in common with the leader of Jamaica? It goes back to the British monarch. The British monarch has a hold on all the countries that are behaving in this manner. You have New Zealand, Australia, throughout the nations where England is pulling the triggers, you're finding these common behavior with the government. They use the two political party wherever you go as instrument to divide and conquer the people and keep them distracted from what's really going on. And so until we start looking at removing the British monarch completely from our affairs, we're going to continue to see some of these symptoms as well.
Well, the government will remove the monarch, depending on how the current fake constitutional reform process is going. One of two things is going to happen, right? Um, if they see that the public is in support of them, okay, let me rephrase that. They're going to go through a process and say we're doing constitutional reform, but either way, they will win. One of two things will happen. They'll eventually bring a question to the public and say, vote on this question. Do you want to leave the monarchy and become a republic? Or do you want to stay? So yes, we want to leave. No, we want to stay. Now, if you vote yes, all you're going to do is to replace the monarchy from the document, take the wording out of the document. They won't say monarch anymore. And they'll replace governor general with the word president. And now they'll say you're a republic. Nothing meaningful would have changed. The very system, the substance of the system will remain in place. The very substance will remain. So whatever is going on now will continue to go on. There will be some window dressing in it. Now, if you vote no and say you don't want to leave the monarchy, you're voting against their fake republic, then guess what? You're still left with it. So it's a win-win for them and a lose-lose for us. Now, our job as the UIC is to figure out how to educate our people to see this and to understand this, right? Without us having any benefit of the media. Okay, because just imagine if we had a real media in Jamaica, eh? Real journalists. They would say, oh my gosh, let's interview these UIC people and juxtapose them beside what is happening with these other guys. So you'll have the fake government saying, yada, 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 yada. And you'll have the fake opposition saying, yada, 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 yada. And you'll have the UIC saying, hold on, people. Here is the serious situation. And the people would say, oh, and that are gone. And guess what would happen? You'd have a movement in the country. And the movement would say, no, no fake republic. We want a real republic. That would now would develop. But the PSOJ oligarchs who control the media and these two parties, in collusion with the colonial powers, of course, want to make sure that this never happens. The Jamaican people never hears this. They can watch a YouTube channel and say, yeah, yeah, like what I say, and a few thousand people would see it. But because it's not on national television, being debated in the national sphere, and it's not on the radio, being talked about. For example, if they were hearing Cliff Hughes, these UIC people, they're onto something here. I wonder. I mean, we should really be looking into this. And then they go to another station and they hear, Muta said, boy, them UIC, them really, I think, them people, I think, man, we need to listen to what them must say. And then they go over to this other station now and they hear this other person and this, and so now you get it now, the whole atmosphere change in the country. And now we start having real discussion now about constitutional reform and real discussions now about good governance. And that's how you would have brought, but they don't want, and they will do everything to stop that from happening. Now we have to find a way to break through the noise on TikTok, on Facebook, on YouTube, break through the noise because people don't want to hear what we're talking about generally. They don't, if they hear it, they'll connect with it. But generally speaking, they want to hear about things that are less significant. They want to hear about, for example, there's a prime minister of somebody on the side in addition to his wife. That will get 70,000 views. You follow me?
Uh,
You understand?
I
They
want
want to hear, yeah, go ahead.
Kevin, I wanted to take us back a bit on the conversation about the oil issue with Jamaicans, because one of the things that we also have to look at is um the oil. Is it necessary for the environment, that we depend so heavily on oil usage? There seems to be lots of alternative, but again, we have a group of individuals in the world controlling these decisions, and people are not getting to know that. You have countries such as Uganda using different type of properties to fuel their vehicles. We don't always need to depend on oil. And another thing about the oil consumption is that we got to remember to respect the earth. We are a people that once had a relationship with Mother Nature. And because we've moved so far away from our true nature as people, we're now following anyone who comes and dictate what we should do. We're not respecting Mother Nature. The earth is acting out of in violence against our conduct towards it. The oil is supposed to remain inside the earth for various reasons because it's there for a purpose. We have inventors coming up with clean energy fuel, and these things are not being discussed. So people are not getting to know that they're cheaper, cleaner alternatives because, again, we're not understanding that those who want to dictate and decide for the entire planet what we should do on a daily with our lives.
Well, the discussion is definitely out there, as in in the sense that in a few years, maybe 30, maybe 20, maybe 40, the idea of the impact and the prosperity of oil would be lessened because of these introductions to the alternatives that you're talking about. But I have a question: environmental effects as a result of the pursuit of oil. What does that mean to the average, normal, day to day Jamaican?
Nothing at
And then
all.
perhaps we can tie that in with the
Uh,
alternatives and
the,
so on.
the
Well,
average Jamaican. So go ahead, Miss Walker.
on the contrary, Mr. Patterson, you did point it out earlier that they are living with some of the effects because they're getting cancer at magnitude. They're getting all types of reactions. They're just not understanding are making the connection between this destruction of the earth, the violation of certain properties in the earth, and their own state of health.
Yeah, that's the case. Yeah, the average Jamaican doesn't even know to care. You know, there are many Jamaicans, for example, who work in dangerous environments and they have no idea about safety, for example. Even if the boss were to mention it to them, it goes through one ears and come out the next because that's what happens when you undereducate your population. Okay, we have not. Jamaica has wasted its human capital over the last 80, 100 years. We've just not educated our people to understand what's going on around them. So they're just living from day to day without an understanding of the environment, economic or otherwise, without understanding the world, what's going on. So what are the health effects here? Um, we have a choice, right? We can pin our hopes on extracting oil from the ground and becoming rich overnight, and people love that. We love to we like the simplistic thinking of just getting rich quickly without doing anything, and it just happens. So all of us would be happy to sit down and hear that Jamaica has oil. The government finds a way to get it done, and oil come out of the ground, and then it just shower us with money, and we're good. We don't care to understand how any of that works or whatever. But here's what happens: if Jamaica were to decide to be very, very, very wise, um, we would be able to do like Costa Rica, where over 90% of their energy comes from renewable sources. So one of the things Costa Rica did was to they have regular rains like us, Wolipa rains like us. So what they did was to dam their rain, dam it in areas, and create artificial mass collection of waters, and then run that and create what is called hydroelectricity, which is when water runs over a turbine and the turbine spins. And let's remove those comments for now, Miss Water. We can come back to them in a bit. Um, the water runs over the turbine and that creates electricity. Now they have been able to generate most of their electricity from that. They also use wind energy, and they use solar energy, and they use geothermal energy, and they use biogas energy. Because of that, the citizens of Costa Rica have very low energy costs. Hydrocarbons or oil forms a small component of their energy use, mostly for cars and not so much for electricity. Okay? Now, Costa Rica is a small country, 5 million people, not very big landmass either, and they have done this. Now, that's only because their leaders proved to be true leaders, both in competence and in vision. And so, because they had the competences and they had the vision, they carried their country there. Now, if Jamaica was to follow that, what does that do? Well, we're polluting our air less if we're using those methods, right? So, air pollution is less. We're not running the risk of destroying our flora and fauna and our seabed by not having oil spills that's going to damage our coast. We're preserving our tourism industry by not putting it at risk of the oil spills that could destroy the industry overnight. Remember, Jamaica is very small. So when we make mistakes that are catastrophic, it's very big for us compared to another country. So, for example, if America has an oil spill, that's a country of over 330 million people with massive landmass that could swallow up Jamaica hundreds of times over. When we make a mistake, if we make any mistake in managing our environment, it's wiped out in no time. So our policies and plans and structures must bear that in mind. A small 3 million population, a small landmass. So we have to preserve that landmass, which is why we should never have gotten into bauxite mining, because bauxite mining is non-renewable. When you extract that, it's gone for good. But suppose you were practicing organic farming and making Jamaica the organic food capital of the world. That's forever. It's perpetual because you're always maintaining the nutrients level of the soil. You're creating an endless cycle of wealth by building our agricultural sector. You're creating an endless cycle of wealth by using water harvesting technology and putting it in our hills and mountains and building large dams and reservoirs to capture these water, and then making sure your farmers will always have water, your people will always have water, and you can now export water around the world as well because you have a renewable, replenishable source. And because you would have maintained your forestries and not destroyed them, you'll continue to attract rain from God's beautiful heavens because of that design. Then you don't want to make sure your schools now are designed to teach the technology necessary. So our kids learn water harvesting technology, solar harvesting technology, geothermal harvesting technology, biogas technology, wind harvesting technology. And that's now permeating our students. So we have the scientists and the engineers and the administrators and the executive directors all being trained on these things, plus maximizing, of course, organic farming to make us the leading country, like the Netherlands did with their small European country. Small European country is the second largest exporter of food in the world. We have everything the Netherlands would love to have and more. We can do that too. So, Mr. Nelson, Ms. Walker, if we control our water, control our energy, control our food, we're healthier, we're more independent, we cannot be manipulated by external forces so easily, and we can now have the kind of human capital development that will make our people and our country the envy of the world.
And it's very important that you mentioned Costa Rica as an example. I mentioned that 99% of their electricity comes from renewables, and of course, out there, that's the new sort of like the new way to go. Especially the environmentalists pressuring the idea of environmental effects and climate change and the idea of fossil fuels and what they do and so on and so on. So and it's important you mentioned New Zealand and so forth because it's important for Jamaicans to be ahead of the game because the trends are showing that this is where the world is going, and it would be very good for Jamaicans to get involved into renewables and so on. So I think very interesting point to make.
Well, right now, Mr. Nelson, I'm a living example of that. We, in my community here, I live among the poor people in Northeast St. Elizabeth. I live in a place called Bow, which borders Elam, Brays River over there, and so on. And in my community, because of my foresight, I built my home. I came back to Jamaica 13 years ago and built my home here. And I make sure to put in a in-ground tank that can hold about 3 to 6 months of water in ground. I built an air tank that can hold similar capacity. I could have put my money into building a very big house, lavish and whatever. I wasn't that smart. I decided to focus on putting in the things that would ensure, like now, where we have no water in these communities since the hurricane Beryl, no water. Nobody has water here. We have no electricity. They have not repaired the lines yet, so we've been in the dark. Of course, you can see I am not in the dark because I put in solar system years ago that provides enough energy to fuel the vast majority of my local needs. Water is the same thing. And I also invested in agricultural land so I can actually feed myself and my family and possibly others as well. So the bottom line is just imagine if our country, our government thought about us as a people the way I thought about my family. Yeah. If they did that for the entire country, led the country, educated the country, trained the country, developed the country, so that we as a nation become independent of depending on imported fossil fuels, independent of importing food because we have truly developed our own food security and protecting our water. we would be in such a strong position today. Nobody could mess with us. But today, our government is so highly dependent upon others that when they say, let's change your school curriculum and teach your children to be confused about their gender. Let's start to put into your policies and program things that are going to create gender warfare in your country. Let us mess with the minds of your people about sexual orientation. Let us, whatever they come with, our government will always, I shouldn't say our government, the PSOJ oligarchs government will always seek to impose on us what their foreign masters say because they're dependent on their foreign masters to keep them afloat. They want to be able to access the loans and the grants because they have not built a Jamaica that is resilient. They have not built a Jamaica that can stand on its own 2 feet. They only boast and brag about various things, but never deliver on building a country which is truly independent of the colonizers, of colonialism, and of their local oligarchs who are really the backer masters on behalf of the foreign masters.
Very thought provoking. Miss Walker, your final thoughts, closing
My
thoughts.
final thought again, it goes back to getting a new body in power that really has the people's interest in mind. We have currently the UIC under the rulership of Mr. Joseph L. Patterson. He's proven his abilities. Jamaica needs to wake up and elect a new government that has their interest.
Thank you, Miss Walker. President Patterson, we'll give you the final word for tonight.
Sure, thank you. And not only the rulership, but the leadership, hopefully, of
Oh yeah, the leadership.
yeah, go don't rule. But thank you, I understand the
Hey, hey,
sentiment.
hey.
Uh, but if we were to find oil in Jamaica's water, that would be a good thing. Um, how we manage it will be an interesting thing, and how we ensure the people of Jamaica benefit from it would be the ultimate outcome. But I'm hoping that if we do find it, and the people really can press upon whoever forms the government to really get accountability in place so that one main thing happens. We do like the people in Europe, I think it's Norway or Sweden, I don't remember which one. What they did when they, with their oil revenues, they created a sovereign wealth fund. What this means is you don't go and damn the money right away, which is what I'm sure they're going to do. They're going to just damn it. As soon as it comes, they just damn it and say, more going come, more going come, more going come. What I'm hoping we do, don't damn the money. Let's invest the money in a sovereign wealth fund. Singapore did this as well. They built a massive sovereign wealth fund. And what you do, you never use the principal. You only use the return on the investment. And you don't use all the return, but you keep expanding the fund. And what you're doing with this, you're ensuring the long-term financial security of the people. So Andrew, if you're listening, Mark, if you're listening, because I know the Jamaican people will unfortunately maybe allow you to return to government because they don't hear from the UIC. But I know you're watching because you watch everything I say and you borrow my thoughts and my ideas and you use them. So borrow this one. Invest in a sovereign wealth fund that puts aside a large chunk of money that will last for 100,000 years for the Jamaican people. Because what this will mean, the next hurricane, the next storm, the next earthquake, or the next global economic or financial meltdown, we would have had a huge reservoir of funds which will keep us resilient against any of these eventualities. But the best security for the Jamaican people really is to hire the people who are doing the thinking without your tax dollars, which is the UIC. We have spent the time to build a thorough plan for Jamaica without a single dollar of taxes. And we have employed these two parties for 80 years and all your tax dollars, and all they have given you is one failure after another. The PNP said time come, and I agree with them. The time has come to tell both of them time up. Let us say enough is enough. Let's move on and create a new and better Jamaica with new leadership a new system so that we can have a new Jamaica. A Jamaica which is safe, clean, and orderly. A Jamaica where every Jamaican can live, earn, and retire with dignity in their own country.
Well, there you have it. Jamaicans home and abroad. Another informative and exciting discussion here, Liberty TV, with our president, Joseph L. Patterson, and our Treasury Secretary, Carrie Ann Walker. We're saying good night for tonight. I'm Kevin Nelson, and we truly enjoyed you. We had fun, right, guys?
It was
Good
great.
night,
Thank you.
everyone.
Take care, everybody.
Bye
Good
Good
bye.
night,
night.
everybody. All the best.